Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Webinar Wednesdays with Uplifter. My name is Jackie Kwan, and I'm one of the co-founders of Uplifter. Today, we have with us today is Garrett Trod, our product expert, and as well as Sandra Oyarzun, our customer relationship manager. So thank you so much for joining us today on this cold Wednesday. I don't know where it is that you are, but it is a little bit chilly here where we are. I have to say, last week I missed out on Webinar Wednesdays, Garrett, and I was a little bit sad. I was sitting in a
You
cold
did.
rink,
Yeah,
and
I know.
I was thinking, darn it, I wish I was doing the webinar with you. So, but I'm glad that I'm here today. So today we
Yeah.
are dealing with or covering everything that has to do with creating invoices, editing and adjusting invoices, doing exchanges and refunds, and as well reporting. Now I know that when Garrett and I were going through the agenda for today's webinar, we were a little bit stressed out because we realized we had so much we wanted to cover. Oh my gosh. So I think we are going to try to keep it down to an hour, but I know that there is a lot of information here with the topics that we want to cover. I think what we decide to do, if there's anything that we don't get through within the hour, we will try and schedule another webinar after the ones that are already scheduled to just cover off some of those topics that we might have missed out on. So sit back, relax. We're going to listen to the beautiful sounds of Garrett's voice as he walks us through invoices today.
I was really tempted to do like a funny squeaky voice.
Oh, thank you for not.
Uh, Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. As Jackie had noted, we are going to go through invoices and we're going to try to touch on reporting, but we're going to definitely look at the nitty-gritty of everything invoices today. So we are going to kick things off with the basics right out of the gate of what is an invoice. I am sure that each and every one of you has gone to a store and made a purchase and you received a receipt. That's exactly what an invoice is essentially within Uplifter. That receipt showed you the items that you purchased, it showed you the payment that you made and stuff like that. The biggest difference is, of course, within the online system is you as site administrators, you can make changes and manipulate that receipt. So it's not this paper receipt, it's now this electronic version, and you have the power to make changes to that. So it's malleable. I refer to it as sort of a living receipt, so you can make those changes. So that's really the biggest difference, but everyone has seen that concept in their life, and that's exactly what you're replicating within the system. Now, invoices are generated within your Uplifter system in one of two primary ways. The first is going to be on the public side. That is when a user logs into the system, adds items to their cart, and checks out. So they either pay right then and there if you guys have credit cards available on your site, or they select an offline option, and that also generates an invoice on your site. That's the main version. The other option is through the administrative system, which is primarily what we're going to look at today. However, we do stress that you and your team and anyone who wants to experience it actually goes through the process of the public side and creating a registration through that process. Whether you create a test account to work with some things, then you just delete everything you did, or whether you actually work with your own account and add some items to your cart, it's a really good experience to go on the public side, click the buttons, experience what your users are going to experience, so that if anyone contacts you and has questions about that process, you'll have those answers ready for them. But primarily today, we are going to be looking at the administrative side because that's where we can do a lot of the manipulation and that's where a lot of the magic happens, where you want to do very specific things. So we'll take a look at that. So when you are creating an invoice, primarily you're going to navigate to accounting, invoices, and this lands you on the invoice manager page. Now, like many of the pages on the left-hand side here, the manager page is going to give you some great overview information. Talked a little bit about the invoices that are already here, so you can see the invoices that have already been processed. You can see their statuses. These are all paid and completed. These are all completed, not necessarily paid. You can see who created these. We got Brian Botano here. He's in a little bit of trouble. He has some outstanding invoices. You can see the information about if this is unpaid, how much the invoice total was. And like any manager page, of course, you can also enter into these options and to these listings to view more information. So the edit option here, where we'll definitely take a lot of our information from. And then you can also view it as the user would view the invoice, so it looks much more like a standardized receipt. And that is a very long invoice. Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about creating an invoice and actually customizing the process of that. First and foremost, as you're going through the process, or as your end user is going through the process, you may want to customize a few elements of that process, or what you're asking for, and the way that certain things react to users. There's a couple of things that you can do within this system. First is going to be creating custom fields. Now, we touched on custom fields in our last couple of webinars as well, and that's just because they're very powerful, they're very flexible, and when you're creating invoices, it may be true to say that you want to know information from users that we don't ask for otherwise. So here you can see on our site, we have some invoice item fields or invoice fields that just ask for different information during the checkout process. These can either be linked directly to the products that people are purchasing, or they can be attached just to the invoice as a whole. So maybe you want to ask for, how'd you hear about us? Would you like to recommend someone? Something like that. So you can really customize that experience that users have as they're proceeding. Now, we're not going to dive too deeply into custom fields, although, Jackie, I think I just heard you.
You can tell I'm lurking because I turned my mute off. I know. So I just wanted to point out this one field that is there by default, which is the comments on the invoice. By default, for a lot of those clubs that joined us, way back when, we added a field that was available, a generic comments field to any of the invoices, so that people could add in some information during the checkout process. What you might want to do if you want a little bit more flexibility of when that displays and how that displays, you might want to disable that comments. And create your own field if you have more specifics that you want to actually enter and report on that a little bit more definitively. But just for any of those clubs that, because I know that there were some clubs previously that asked us, can you disable that field? Because I don't want people telling me anything on the invoice. I just want to take their money, and I want to have them come to either the office and ask a question. So now here you can disable it here. Sorry, Garrett, go ahead.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And then the other element that you can change, so that's custom fields. You can add and ask for questions and things like that, and ask for information. But you can also change certain settings of your site through settings, Uplifter settings, site options. And on this page, as we scroll down here, you can see there's a ton of ways to customize your site and make it function and feel exactly how you want. But near the bottom here, we get to our invoice settings, where we can customize a few elements like how long the cart takes to expire, certain checkout options in terms of your default installments, how credit is used, whether it's always applied automatically or whether it's applied by default, but they can undo that. There's a lot of ways that you can customize this experience to make sure that your site and your system works exactly how you want it to. And with either of these pages, please always be sure to hit Save All to keep any changes that you want to keep. So from here, why don't we take a look at the basic invoice structure. Now, we're going to go through this in detail, but I want to go over the basic structure first. The basic structure will be split into three main pieces. First piece will be the billing information here. You can see billing information for the club and the user. The next will be the invoice details section, which is going to list all the items, the programs, the products, the tickets, etc., that they purchased. And this is where you can make manipulations and things like that, which we'll see in just a bit. And the third piece is going to be the payment section. Now, the payment section is going to show you everything that's happened in regards to payments, whether it's been declines, whether they're upcoming, whether they're paid, etc. You'll be able to see all the action that happened there, and also take actions if you are making some adjustments, which again, we'll be looking at. So those are the three main pieces. And the reason I bring that up is because you won't always see all three of these pieces right out of the gate, especially when we start generating our own invoices through the administrative side. It's actually only going to show us a piece of the puzzle here until we proceed with adding certain things and proceeding with certain options. So those are the three main pieces there. We also have the ability to add notes here just under the payment section. That's a little fourth option there, but it's not as pertinent as the other three, of course.
I'm going to give a little sneak peek for next week's webinar that's about accounting. But just in general, if you are looking at any of the reports within Uplifter or any of the elements within Uplifter in terms of how to manage the information into your accounting system, anything that is considered a revenue is in the top part of that invoice. So it's that second part. Anything under program registration, subscriptions, products, that whole top part, if you just add all of that up, that is considered all of your revenue. So if you see a report that says revenue, it's basically an addition of any of those lines at the top. Everything below the payments portion of the invoice we consider is basically considered a receipt or an asset, because it's being deposited into one of your bank accounts in some way, shape, or form. Or if it's a pending payment, it would be considered a receivable. So there's always those two parts of any invoice. It's not only the money that you're receiving, and you're considering that as revenue, any of the things that you're charging for, which is considered revenue, or the money that you're receiving, which is considered an asset. So go ahead, Garrett, sorry.
Thank you very much. Excellent. So yes, that's a very important piece of the puzzle as well. Let's talk a little bit about creating an invoice from scratch. As you may or may not know, Uplifter offers you a lot of really quick little ways to get where you need to get. First and foremost, of course, the most standardized way is going to accounting invoices and selecting to add a new invoice, to create a new invoice. However, there are other options as well within the system. You can also go to accounting invoices and highlight over this. You'll actually see that even if you're not actually on the page as well. So you can see here we have the plus sign for new members and stuff like that. So this will actually generate a new invoice as well. You can also create a brand new invoice from scratch from the members page. So people and accounts, member accounts. You can find the desired member and select this little plus icon. And those are the ones you'll probably know about, but one that you may not know about is directly from the waitlist. So if you're under products and programs, and we happen to go to the view option here to see the waitlist, we can actually scroll down to the waitlist and create an invoice from scratch right from here for that person and their waitlist program there. So there are some quick links to get to where you need to get to and create the invoice from scratch. And if you are generating it in a manner that is not specific to a member, so from the members page or from the participants page, then the system will actually ask you who this is for. So that's what we've done here. We went to accounting invoices and created a new invoice. On the right-hand side, if we don't have the member in our system yet, we can generate that new member. On the left-hand side, if we do have that member, we can simply select them from the system suggestions and create an invoice for them. And we're going to choose Will Webinar. Our biggest fan, Will Webinar. So here we go. We have a brand new invoice created from the administrative side. And as noted previously, this will eventually have all of the pieces, all of those fundamental elements of the structure. But right now it only has the first few pieces. First off, we have the billing information section here. Here we have your club's information. Now this is changeable to anyone with the merchant credentials permission or the managed merchant credentials permission. Permissions, of course, granted through settings permissions. And once you have that, you'll be able to navigate to settings, Uplifter settings. And on the Uplifter settings page, with the correct permission, you'll see this additional 5th tab, merchant details here. This is where you'll see your billing information as it pertains to your club, to your members. So the information that's present here will be shown at the top right or top left of all of your invoices. Next, we have our billing information section. This is, of course, going to pertain to the actual member that's paying for the invoice. You can utilize address information that's already existing within the system. You can edit existing information, or as you may have seen, you can also create a new address. Now, it is important to note that the billing information section does need to match whoever is paying. That is, if grandma or grandpa comes one day and wants to pay for an invoice, this billing information section needs to match their information, especially if they're paying via credit card. You'll need to update that information to have it processed correctly. The contact information, just the same as the billing information, where you can make new ones, edit existing ones, but this can, of course, just be the member's information. So you can address these as you need to. And Jackie, I sort of heard you in the background. Did you have a comment?
No, I'm just typing.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I'm actually just answering a chat from one of our webinar users.
Okay.
So just don't mind me. Don't mind me.
Okay. The next section here we have then is the invoice details section. And again, this is where all of the products that you're selling are going to reside. Now, if you are working with a member who doesn't have participants yet or needs just an additional participant, you can always do that right from the invoice by selecting add participant, and you can fill in the information here. Depending on the custom fields that you've created, you'll also see certain custom fields here as well if you have them set to be visible during participant creation. Again, we're not going to jump too deeply into that, but you can generate a new participant at any point in time. Next, we're going to select Add Program to introduce a new program to this, and we're going to select Webinar Wednesdays at $500. When you add a new product, a new program, a new ticket, when you add anything new to the invoice, it's going to be expanded, which is what we'll see the difference between expanded and not expanded in just a second, but it'll also be highlighted in blue with this nice little blue hem trim here. This lets you know that you just added this. This is the newest item that you've added to the invoice. Now, this is the expanded version of this. If we select this little check mark here, we'll go to the non-expanded version, just collapses a little bit of the information. This is the standard view of products and programs, etc., that you'll see on an invoice, the collapsed version, where you see who the item is for, if that's pertinent. Some items are for the account as a whole. You'll see the name of the program, if it's a program. You'll see the category and category level, as well as some other information about the program. And of course, you'll see the price. Now, if you do want to return back to that expanded version, you can select the edit icon here, and you can certainly do so. When it's expanded, you'll have the ability to make manipulations such as who the participant is, who's actually involved in the program or the subscription or whatever you're selling. You can also change the category level. Now, by default, the system will utilize the automatic select option in order to determine what category level they should be falling into. More often than not, if you guys keep your data reasonably up to date, then that's going to be totally fine. But of course, you as site administrators, you can absolutely manipulate that yourself and say, you know what, nope, they should be in Kansgate too. I'm going to select that option there.
On
So
that note, Garrett, sorry, I'll let you finish, and then I have a note to say. Sorry.
I was just going to say, when you're happy with that, click this. There we go.
What I was also going to mention is in the reporting, when you actually see reports where it says filtered by program registrations or filtered by category level, very often what it associates to is the category level that is displayed on the invoice on this page. So that might be why if you've got one category that encompasses several category levels, like for example in the case of a Kansgate with multiple Kansgate levels, if you look for Kansgate 3, but you know that you have a participant that happened to be in Kansgate 2 last year and you didn't update their elements, when you pull a report, it is based off of the category level that is displayed on the invoice of the invoice that you're looking up. So, and that's how the revenues are actually accumulated and aggregated in the reporting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Excellent. So that is programs. Now, of course, if you are manipulating an item, or even if you're not manipulating, if it's in the collapsed version, you can, of course, always remove the item from the invoice by selecting the delete icon, and that just removes it there. We are actually going to keep Webinar Wednesdays on there. Now, when you are adding a program, actually, my apologies, I skipped over this. When you're adding a program, you'll be landing on the Current tab. The Current tab will show you all of your programs that are currently active, so open for registration. If you need to add something to the invoice that was previous or coming up, it hasn't opened yet, you can use the program search option. And you can type in the SKU, the season, program name, whatever it needs to be. In both this search box and in this quick search box here, you can actually use partial words. So it doesn't need to be the full name. Even if you don't really remember the name, you're just like, it's on a Tuesday. I think it's on a Tuesday. You can actually just type in Tues and see exactly, oh, there's my programs that are on Tuesdays. So you don't need to necessarily know the full thing. And that's the same with the program search. If I put in Tuesday, oh, I don't actually get anything. Very strange. Oh, because all my current programs. So there we go. So the quick search, of course, you can put in anything you want there. Don't need to memorize all your program names. That would be silly. We are going to add in Webinar Wednesdays here, and we're going to accept that. Now, the next option that we have here is to add a subscription or product. Now, everything else that you sell that isn't a program will either be a subscription or product or a ticket. And those are all encompassed within this subscription or product tab here. Similar to the programs, we're introduced with a quick search. So if we do want to find something very specific, we kind of search and reduce our options there. As we scroll through here, we'll see our subscriptions, our products, and we can add whatever we'd like to. So maybe we're going to add in a drop-in 10-pack here, whatever we'd like. And very similar to how the program added, it adds with blue and that blue trim. It's also going to add in the expanded version with the check mark here, so we can make changes for who this is for, and this particular product is a ticket that can be redeemed more than once, so we can customize how many redemptions are available and stuff like that. When we're happy with that, of course, we can hit the check mark and we're all set back to the collapsed version. Now, one thing you may have noticed under the add subscription or product option, if you are keen-eyed there is also the ability to add a custom line. So if there are instances where there's one-offs or you just need to quickly add some cost to an invoice, you can actually create your own custom lines. Now, in order to do this, you simply select the add subscription or product tab, you type in whatever you want it to be, another fee, and then you enter in the price that you want this to be. So maybe we can do $100. And when we add that in, we now have this custom line that is not otherwise sold through our system. It's just this one-off item. And of course, we can report on that as well. That's no problem. And then we can click accept there. And now we have that all set. Now, as you can see, as I'm adding items here, they are being split by these headers. So I have my program registration section, my products, and if I were to add a subscription, maybe this volunteer buyout, that is also separated into its own option there as well. So you can see nice clean sections like that. When you're happy with everything that you've added to the invoice, you're ready to proceed with the next step. But before you do, really before you move on past adding these items here, 99% of the time you want to hit this magic calculate button.
I should have had ominous music for that. Like, it sounded really dark the way you said
need
that.
One of those tin things where it makes
Yeah.
a lightning sound.
Yeah.
Excellent. So yes, you absolutely want to hit this calculate button. What this calculate button does is it's going to look through the system and look for any additional fees, any additional discounts, anything that should apply based on what's being purchased here, and add it to the invoice. So let's hit calculate and see what happens. Boop, here we go. So we now have some additional items. Now these are white because the system added these to the invoice. We see Walter Webinar owes a Skate Canada membership. This might also be something like a Gymnastics Ontario, Gymnastics BC, or MMA, whatever it is, some sort of membership to the site of the system. We also see some club administration fees as well as a family annual fundraiser fee. These are all items that you can craft within your system, and you can make them mandatory or non-mandatory. In this case, these are all mandatory. Now here we have two examples of account-specific items. So there are no participants selected or noted here. That's because they apply to the account as a whole, and in this instance, they probably just need one per account per season or what have you. We also, after hitting calculate, are noted, are indicated with any errors that may occur within the system as well. So here we have Webinar Wednesdays, and we can see that in order to join Webinar Wednesdays, we see that Walter has not met any of the requirements, and there's one requirement. And so we can see down here, the participant needs to have achieved, in this particular instance, CanSkate 1 agility for whatever reason. Now, were Walter checking out through the public side of things, this error may actually stop them from checking out. This depends on how strict your errors are, and we talked about that a little bit in a past webinar, where you can control the strictness. Maybe it's a warning, maybe it's preventing them from checking out. But you as site administrators, you control this site. This is your domain, you're in power here. So if you want to, even if Walter hasn't finished his CanSkate agility, or maybe it's an age requirement, or maybe it's a purchase requirement, doesn't matter. If there's an error here, you can absolutely select accept this error, and now you can proceed with working with this invoice, how you've set it up. So now that we're happy with this, I'm going to click calculate one more time here just to make sure. And yeah, so no changes, no warnings from the system. We're looking good, and I'm happy, and I'm ready to proceed with the next steps. The next steps here, we have two options. We can either save as pending, or we can select payment method and post. Save as pending is a great way for you to craft an invoice and save it for a user to log in and access it later on. Now, when it's a pending invoice, it will actually expire based on your cart expiry settings. We looked at that at the beginning where we went to the system settings and we talked a little bit about invoice settings there. One of those is how long it takes your cart to expire. By default, it's 30 minutes. So if you save this as pending, then by default, this has 30 minutes to be used. So the user can log in and they can access this, which we're actually going to see in just a moment here. Additionally, if you are pending your invoice here, you can scroll down to the bottom and you can put this invoice on hold as well. Now, hold is a bit of a different scenario. This actually keeps the invoice in place for much longer than the cart, really until you take it off of hold. So by clicking put this invoice on hold, I now see the option to remove hold here. And this invoice is now in place until I take it out of place, or until the user, the end user, takes action on it. So now that this is on hold, or even if it was just in that pending state, I can now log in as Will Webinar, and I can actually see the items in my cart. I can see that, oh, I don't meet that requirement. I can see the items that have been added, and I can also see that these mandatory items I cannot remove, but the other items I can take action on. Maybe you as a site admin added something that I don't want, like another fee. No way. So I can just hit delete. I don't want that anymore. So there we are. Now, if you want to remove that from hold, of course, you just navigate back to that and select remove from hold. But if you navigate away from this invoice, what you might find, is that this is highlighted in blue to indicate that it is on hold. So that is definitely something to be aware of. Additionally, there is also another status while we're here called pending. Now, pending invoices will show up when users log in. Pending invoices are invoices that have been generated by the system but haven't been completed by the end user. So here we have John Smith, an invoice that was created because I, John Smith, logged into the system. This happens for administrators, happens for end users, absolutely anyone who logs into the system. The system will save on resources by immediately generating an invoice, and if they use it, they use it. If they don't, they don't. And that's one of the reasons why, and actually I think the only reason why, your invoices might skip numbers. So 898 to 903, 832. So it's totally natural that these skip numbers, and that's totally fine. The cool thing about pending invoices, if it so happens that you are contacted by your end user about questions about certain things, if they are logged in, you can navigate to the accounting invoices page and filter by pending and actually view the items that they've been adding to cart. So if John had been adding some items to his cart here but hadn't yet checked out, I can select to edit this option here, and I'd actually be able to see the items that he has added to cart. This is a terrible example because clearly I haven't added anything, but you actually be able to see the items that I've added to cart here, and you can see the countdown as well regarding his invoice there. Close these items up. So we're going to return back to the Will webinar invoice here. Now again, Will can take action on this from the public side, and if he does so, he'll also be able to view the policies and go through all of those elements. If you happen to finish the invoice on their behalf, then they won't have access to those those policies. You'd have to probably just email them, or we may actually be developing some additional options for that as well in the future. Now, if we want to proceed with this invoice on Will's behalf, what we're going to want to do is remove this hold so we can begin to take action on it. So we remove the hold, and now we have options to proceed. As I scroll down here, we can see we have that save as pending, so I can return back to that status if I want to. But in this particular instance, we're happy with everything that we have here, and we're going to select payment method and post. By doing so, that's going to do two main things. Number one, it's going to add in our third and final segment of our invoice, which is the payment section. And number two, it removes that calculate button, that magic, lovely calculate button. So what that means to you is moving from the calculate option, the option before this status, and clicking that select payment method and post option is moving from an automatic element to a manual element. So from this point on, any changes or manipulations that you want to make to this invoice would all be manual elements. So you'll definitely want to make sure that you've added in your items, you hit calculate, and then you proceed to this state. It's not the end of the world if you happen to forget something. You can, of course, scroll back up here and you can add those items. That's no problem. When you're happy with absolutely everything in this section, in the invoice details section, you can then scroll down to the payment section. It is very important to note that at the bottom of the invoice details section, you will see a total. And within your payment section, you will see a total of payments. And this might be split across some, what have you, or just this one single payment. In any case, this needs to absolutely match 100% these values, this value, sorry. So these two sections of your sorry to keep chatting here, these two sections of your invoice need to absolutely match 100%. There's no way to post this if it doesn't. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So here we have a single payment. If I'm happy with this, I can just hit post. I can save this invoice. I can proceed. However, if I want to make some manipulations to the payment section here, I can absolutely do so as well. There are a couple of things of note here, very similar to how we have these blue items up here. Those were manually added, or those were items added by our team, by ourselves. We added those in. Down here, we see yellow highlighted items to indicate payment lines that have been added by the system. So these are automatically generated by the system here. Now, when an item is yellow, that indicates a non-static payment. And a non-static payment can be manipulated in multiple ways, which we'll see in just a second. If, however, I were to edit this line and simply accept it, it turns blue, indicating that this is a line that I generated. So I've now accepted that this is how the settings that I want and everything's good here that I want. And so it's now moved from a non-static yellow option to a static blue option. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what does that mean? What do I care? Well, if we return back to this yellow version here, we actually have some tools that we can use to our advantage. First and foremost, we have these options along this top bar here. So pay by check, so this pay by option here, for instance, we see that right now this is check, but if I change this, I can change any non-static, any yellow item. Similarly, I can also select to create installments. Now, installments are based off of the installment structure that you have in your products and your programs. So if you do happen to select this option here and no installments are generated, you'll want to investigate your products and programs to make sure that they have installments enabled. But we're going to select this option, and because this is yellow, that's going to split. It's going to automatically figure out these items, and it's going to split these items for us. Now, if I want to, I can go back to this pay by option and I can change this, and that's going to change all of my non-static, all of my yellow items. So let's undo this and let's take a look at what would happen of a static versus a non-static. So I'm going to edit this line and I'm going to actually change this value. I'm only going to do $500. And as soon as I create this line, the system's going to generate a new line to compensate for the rest of the value. So the blue line is the line that I created. This is a static line. And the yellow line is a line that the system created. It's a non-static line. And so if I start to make changes, like calculating my installments, it will affect only the yellow line, and my blue line stays the same. Now note the sort of sandwiching here. This is because your installments that are system generated will be based off of the invoice creation time, 128, whereas the line that you generated will be based off of the time that you generated it. So there's just a few minutes difference, but technically this one comes before. Semantics. So that is something to keep in mind. If it is yellow, you can use these tools up here. If it is blue or white, you won't be able to use these tools up here.
Just to touch on that a little bit further, the time that you had noted, you're right, by default, it does specify it as per the invoice creation time. But when you click on that calculate installments from, you can actually update the time to which you actually calculate the installments for. So for example, if you are working with an invoice that has already been completed and you want to sort of backdate the installments based off of the time that the individual actually created their invoice, and Garrett might touch on this a little bit later as we're editing and adjusting invoices, it can use those details to actually adjust the installment calculations based on that. So for example, if you were to change that date, I'm gonna throw this wrench into your demonstration and see if this works. If you change that to December 2nd, for example, like something after, yeah, exactly. So once you start moving it, it's actually going to calculate if they were to have checked out from the cart on one of the other installment dates, it would just accumulate all of the payments and the installments as they would have appeared during the checkout process if they would have checked out on that date. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to create those installments the way that you need them to.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, you have one additional tool available to you, and that is the use available credit here. So if the user does have a credit, the gift certificate on their account, they can select this option here, and that'll use the credit on your behalf. So there's the full $100 there, and there's my little gift certificate code, etc. Now, when you are selecting to manipulate a payment, you're going to select this edit icon, and you can begin making changes to the various elements within this payment's information. very similar to what we saw when we were expanding these items, where we saw additional information we could make changes to. So here, when we expand a payment, we can change the status, so pending, processed, etc. We can change the date and time at which it was processed or manipulated. We can change the medium, so check, cash, gift certificate, etc. Whatever payment methods that you offer within your system, you'll find here. And of course, we can add a little note if we'd like to regarding this specific payment. And finally, we can change or manipulate the price. So as we saw previously, I can actually say, you know what, they're only going to pay $100 right now, $100 right now, and the rest will be paid later. And the system automatically compensates for that change that I've made. Now, as we move forward with editing invoices and doing some of the crazier stuff that we're about to do, it is important to remember that you will not be able to post until this equals these. So definitely keep that in mind. So when we are happy with this, I'm just going to delete it and just leave one line here. I'm happy with this invoice, I'm happy with the payments that are here, and I'm ready to select post. And again, if you'd like to, you can also add a note here. You can add a note about, a private note that only administrators can see, or a public note that even the user can see as well, if you'd like to. But in this instance, we're not going to do that. We're happy with everything we've done, and we're officially going to hit post, which officially generates an invoice on our system. You must balance before saving. See, I told you guys. I'm going to remove that system, man. So 7. Okay. So once we're happy with everything we've done, we're going to hit that post there. And I'm actually going to, I think I've done too many little weird manipulations here. So let's recreate this. Hello, webinar. So under normal circumstances here, we would select to add a program. So let's actually look at what this process looks like without actually worrying about all the ins and outs of things. So I'm going to create an invoice here. I'm going to add my desired item. I click calculate. We can already see he's registered in that. Jeez Louise, eh? Holy cow.
I think it's because you're logged in on the public side and there's that other invoice sitting there. Yep. And he's probably using that. Do you have another invoice that we can go through the editing, or did you want to actually use a specific?
Yes.
Yeah, why don't we go and use a different invoice for editing? So a couple of notes. When you're actually creating an invoice from scratch, always note that you actually have to post it with a payment in order for that invoice and their placement in the program registration to be reserved. So if you don't actually put in a payment method, then it doesn't consider the system doesn't consider it as a completed invoice, and because of that, they might the slots might drop off and they may lose their spot. So if you are using Uplifter as sort of a point of sale system, you're creating manual registrations, always remember to click post with the payments to ensure that the registration spots are maintained. So, oh, you finished. Wow. Okay. So did you want to continue on?
Yeah. So once you've actually posted your invoice here, you will see the receipt version or the view version of the invoice, where you can see the items they bought, see the payments they made or didn't make in this instance, etc. And of course, if you've created it from the administrative side, the system is not going to send them a version of this by default. It is up to you to send or not send that. So if you create an invoice and you don't want them to see a copy, you don't have to. But if in normal circumstances you do, you'd scroll down to the bottom and you would resend the invoice to the member, and that sends an email off that shows them all of this information here. You can also return back to the editing option here, or you can go back to accounting invoices and you'll now see it listed at the top of your listing. This is by date and time here, so it's at the top of your listing, and now we can select to enter into this or view it again, and we can start making manipulations. So that is the basics of the invoices. I know we are 40 minutes in. Oh, geez.
We have to edit invoices and we have to do exchanges and refunds. So what's next?
All right. So next we are going to do exactly that. We're going to edit this invoice. So now that this invoice is here, we can return to it by selecting this edit option and enter back into this invoice. Now, when we are doing that, we'll now have some new options available to us. First and foremost, if you have programs listed here, you'll be able to withdraw the user. Simply by clicking this button right here and turning it gray, you have effectively removed them from the roster of this program. But please note, this does not affect the cost. So I've been toggling them in and out of this program, but this price isn't changing. So that's what we're going to look at right now. If you do need to withdraw or you just need to make an adjustment to the cost, you can absolutely do that. Now, if you're creating a program from scratch, or sorry, an invoice from scratch, please note that you can only make manipulations of this nature after you've clicked the select payment method and post button. So after you've moved from the automatic to the manual elements, then you can start making these type of manipulations. But more often than not, you're going to create your invoice, and then the only time you really need to make adjustments is when you're editing them. So when we come back here, or whether you're creating a new one, we can select to edit the item in question. We can now begin to make changes. So we can make changes to who's in the program, what level they're on. We can also withdraw them again from this option here. But you may also notice that we can add an adjustment, and that's exactly what we want to do in order to manipulate the cost of this program. So right now, this is $500. We're going to select to add an adjustment. And here we can do two options. We have two options for us. Option number one is we can add a custom adjustment, and option number two is we can add an adjustment based off of discounts within our system. Now, this is one that throws a few people off in terms of really what should I be doing here. Whenever you're adding an adjustment, you want to ask yourself, does this pertain to a discount within my system? For instance, should this person be getting a buy one, get one half off discount because of the items that they're purchasing? In this particular instance, they're only buying one program, so they couldn't possibly be getting one half off. So I know not to use this discount. Similarly, there's not two participants, so none of these discounts are applicable as a reason as to why I'm reducing this. So I'm going to use the description, this custom option here.
As you're filling that in, Garrett, the reasons why you might want to actually specify that the adjustment is attached to a discount would be because of two things. Either A, the discount that you've actually created is calculated across multiple invoices or across the season, as it were. If you've created a season level discount and you want the program that you're actually working with to use the discounted amounts in context of calculating future invoices that are based off of the whole season, you'll want to ensure that you attach the proper discount so that Uplifter in the background can do the calculations to determine, oh, this is a BOGO that is allowed to work across multiple programs that they actually register for throughout the year. It will know to apply any of the adjustments that you've added here to the future calculations of that discount in future. Additionally, what this will also do is if you're actually using our ledger accounts feature within Uplifter, if you've actually tagged your discount specifically to work with different ledger elements, it will use this discount that you've specified here to determine which ledger account to apply those values to as it filters through your ledger.
I knew you were here for a reason. Thank you very much, Jackie.
No problem.
So yes, and unless you're certain that you need to use a discount, you probably want to default to this custom description. So we've entered in our custom description, and we can add the option here, and this is going to default to a negative value. So if I now put in a value here, like $50, for instance, and I select accept, I'm now down $50. But if I needed to, I can click this button and it turns it into a positive, and now it's plus $50 plus, so it's now $550. So we're going to change it to a negative. We're going to click OK, and we're going to click accept here. Now that is really it for making adjustments. You simply click add adjustment, you name your adjustment, you add it, and you set the adjustment cost. So the variation, maybe it's another $80. This guy's got a lucky day happening here. So now he only pays $370. And of course, the taxes will adjust accordingly there. So we are going to click accept on this, but what we'll notice is now that we've made an adjustment, the total value of our invoice details section is now lower than what it was previously. So when I scroll down to the bottom here into the payments section, we now see that there's a dissonance here. There's a difference between this section and this section here. So we need to take action on that. When items are red, we know that we need to refund the user. There's also an indicator if you need to accept payments. So you'll see another new payment line here. So here what we want to do is essentially we want to perform a refund. In this particular instance, the user hasn't actually paid us. So we don't actually owe them money either. we're going to just select to either edit this line and reduce it by 146, or the easier option here, because I'm lazy, I'm going to click delete, and the system will do all the math for us. So in this instance, if you do the delete option, you may want to review the date and time that the payment is owed, as that will update based on the current time there. Last but not least, when you're happy with that, of course, you're going to hit post and save that. But what we were really looking at is the adjustment element, because that's a very important factor, especially into what we're about to talk about, which is switching programs. So let's say, for sake of argument, we don't have any of the adjustments here. It's simply just a $500 program, and the person is in the program, so they're not yet withdrawn. Now, Walter here, he's not able to make Wednesdays. Instead, he'd like to do Thursdays. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to the invoice edit page here, and I'm going to select to add a program. When I do this, I'll be able to look up the program that he wants, which is the Thursday webinar series, and I can add that to the cart. Now, when I add that to the cart, very much like any other program, I can make adjustments, stuff like that, but I can accept the line here. And now we have two programs. Now, depending on the way that your club handles things, and again, you'll want to talk to your accountant, your treasurer, etc., to make sure that everyone's on the same page here. But generally speaking, the most common way to handle this scenario is to reduce the previous program by the appropriate amount, and if needed, reduce this program by the appropriate amount. What that means is, let's say for sake of argument, Walter here never came to any Wednesday webinars. The program didn't even start yet. He probably requires a full refund. In that case, instead of just deleting this item, we'll want to edit it, add an adjustment, and set that to the full value. And in so doing, we're essentially saying the revenue should no longer be added to this particular program, but we still want to see it on this invoice so that we can look back on things and report, you know what, Walter did initially try to go to the Wednesdays and then switch to Thursdays. So by making this adjustment rather than deleting the line, we can now keep our reporting a little bit cleaner and a little bit more obvious and transparent. And the good news is, since these two programs were the same price, and since I reduced this down to $0, the amount owing in total has not changed. And when I scroll down to the bottom, I see my regular value there. Did I delete an item? What's going on there?
So one of the things, this was from before, when you're, so much time has passed, you've forgotten what you've done. Depending on which way it is that you want to do this, because you do have the option of actually deleting the item off the invoice, and we've had actually numerous debates here within the office as which is best practice. And really a lot of that depends on your club and what your accountant or your bookkeeper, your treasurer wants to see, or what type of visibility you want to see as a club. So the method that Garrett showed you, where he actually did do, left the original program in place, showed the withdrawal, and then adjusted the price to 0, gives you full visibility on this invoice to know that this individual withdrew on this day. And not only that, when you actually save this, it actually shows the withdrawal date too, I believe. It shows you the date that they withdrew and then the date the new program was added. So then you as an administrator can come to this invoice and see sort of backtrack what has happened. If it's really early on and the program hasn't even started yet and your accountant hasn't even exported any of the revenues or whatnot out of Uplifter into their accounting program, then you can certainly just delete the item if you don't need that because they just made an accident in the shopping cart, and you'll achieve the same net effect. If you are using our ledger accounts on our Uplifter Gold and Uplifter Silver plans, you'll see that financial in and out, regardless of whether or not you do it as an adjustment or if you do it where you delete the program and re-add the new program. So if you are on one of our tiers that offers the ledger accounts, I highly recommend using that feature, and that gives your accounting exports the full visibility of the financial transactions that occur on those elements.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Excellent. So this is an example of a quick switch. These are two programs that cost the exact same amount. And again, depending on your club's practices and standards here, you may want to reduce the program to $0, or you may want to delete the item. There is another instance that may occur when you're switching a program for the same cost. It may be true to say that they did come for a few days of the program. In that instance, rather than reducing to $0, you'd actually want to edit the program, and you'd want to add an adjustment to bring it down to the cost of those few days. So they're going to withdraw, and it's going to be, you know what, he owes us another $200, so we're not going to give him $30. We're going to give him $300 back, and there we go. So he now, because he's only come for a few days out of the full set, he owes us $200 still, but the remaining cost is not owed. Now, if that's the case, if it's a direct switch, it's probably true to say that the Thursday webinar needs an adjustment too, because he didn't attend the first few. And since these programs are the exact same price, it makes it nice and easy for us. We're going to add an adjustment to this program, and we're going to reduce that by $200 because he missed the equivalent days from the Wednesday one. So these again balance out for us nicely as we scroll down here. It's the same cost and no adjustment is needed. So that's definitely something to consider as well. But this is a really clean example. This is a nice scenario where things are happening really nice and easy and everything's the same price here. What happens when that's not the case? So let's actually refresh this so we can start anew. We're back here. We've got Walter. He's registered in the Wednesday webinar, and the total is 710 here. Now, Walter wants to go out of Wednesday and enter into Friday, which is totally fine. We're going to add the program here, and we're going to look for Webinar Fridays. But Webinar Fridays is an additional $100, a very popular day. So in order for Walter to proceed with this, he needs to pay another $100. In this particular instance, it's $600 because I haven't made my adjustments yet, but he needs to pay another $100 compared to his previous purchase. So if we wanted to, we can withdraw him from Wednesday. We can add an adjustment saying he is withdrawn. If I can pretend like I spelled that right, and I'm going to select to add that. And I'm going to withdraw for $500. It's fine. He didn't actually attend any of the days. I'm going to give him a full refund in this particular instance. And now when I come down to the bottom here, he still owes another $100 if I had my taxes enabled. Why don't I have any of my taxes enabled? There we go. There we are, $113 because of tax. So that is something to consider as well. Now that's an instance, that's also a reasonably clean instance because he owes you guys more money. You haven't made any exchanges, nothing's really happened here. Let's look at one more example. But before we look at that example, I'm gonna go down here and I'm gonna change this to paid. Now process payment is essentially the paid status. This is letting the system know that when you set this to process, when you hit post, push this through and complete it. So I'm gonna post this payment. And then we're going to return back to this invoice edit option here.
Actually, can we do it a different way?
No, wait, lady. Yeah,
please. Why don't you click on Will Webinar's account? And because I don't know if all of our clubs know that you can actually do exchanges here. If you go to the participants, and let's go find Walter's account. So, because very often you might have somebody sitting in the office or walking up to you in the office and they said, you know what, I accidentally picked Wednesdays and I really needed to pick Fridays. And you might not be on the invoices page, but you might be just looking for their profile to see where they're at. So one way that you can actually do it is if you've actually found the profile of the participant, you can actually come here and Garrett, I'm just going to let you carry on because I think you know probably what it is that I want to.
Nope, I have no idea. I'm totally lost.
Oh. You're joking.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I'll let you go with
it. So right from this page, we've actually added a couple of links here that allow you to actually get to the invoice that needs to be adjusted. But even on the far right, that allows them to withdraw as well. Is that the one? Right here. So if you click on that one, it takes you back to that invoice that they were actually that we were working on, and it actually provides you with more of a condensed view of the invoice of the actual program that they're registered for. So if they happen to have registered for 4 or 5 things and you really just want to move them from the one, you can actually just click on the one edit icon, and it will actually, like I said, bring you to a condensed view of this invoice with just the one program that you actually want to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually perfect for invoices that are really, really big, especially if you start introducing, if your club hosts some competitions maybe, and you maybe have some teams that are registering, you can have a lot of participants and a lot of action happening on any one invoice. So going through the member's account to the participant profile, you can also get there through people and accounts participants, of course. When you get to the participant profile and you go through it with this edit icon, that's sort of rolls things up and sort of condenses things and suppresses things. So it makes for a nice clean view of what you need to work with. Thank you very much for that. Excellent. So we are going to look at one final option here. I don't think I got rid of this. Okay, there we go. So one final option here, we're going to look at a very common scenario where something's being exchanged, or really maybe you're just they're just withdrawing or what have you, and you need to perform a refund, the dreaded refund. Dun, dun, dun. No one likes to give money back. So what you need to do is you need to take action on the invoice details section, because if we scroll down to the bottom right now, the invoice details section and the payment section are equal. So we can't really make adjustments. If we came here and we tried to give John Smith back some money and we said, you know, we owe John Smith $100. There you go, John Smith. What's going to happen is it's going to give him us $100 back, but it's going to immediately request that $100 back from him. The system is not doesn't know that you're trying to give him something back, because nothing's been adjusted up here. Everything's still full price, everything's still full value, and this still requires him to pay $710 for these items. So if I try to give him money back, the system's just going to say, no, that doesn't make sense, and here's a new payment line. So instead, what we're going to do is we need to make an adjustment to the items that have been purchased in order to grant that refund. Let's say, for sake of argument, Walter is actually going to withdraw from this program. We're going to click that withdraw button. That removes him from the roster. Next, we're going to edit that program line, and we're going to add an adjustment in order to manipulate the cost of this. He is withdrawing, and we're going to add a withdrawal value of, let's say, it's going to get $400 back. Can't type today. There we are. So now he only owes $100 plus taxes, of course. And when we scroll down here, the system is notifying us of that element. So if you don't see this, you can't perform a refund. Now that we have this paid value here, we have this difference between the value of the invoice details section and the payments here. We can now click this refund icon. And when we do, it's going to default to two things. It's going to default to the value that you owe them, and it's going to default to the medium, the original medium. So if this was credit card, for instance, if they paid by credit card, it would just default to credit card. You can, of course, make changes to that. If you want to refund a gift certificate, you can absolutely do so. Keep the funds within your system. That's totally fine. Here, we're going to create a new gift certificate, and we're going to call this refund. And now I'm ready to go. Now, when I select this checkmark button, rather than the system saying, hey, wait a minute, and adding its own line, everything's going to balance for us. And so now we just have the payment that was made and the refund we're about to make. And now we can hit post successfully and actually process this refund.
I know we're running out of time, but for those accountants in the audience or bookkeepers in the audience, the reason why this is a two-step process is because when we are actually refunding a customer and we're actually giving them funds back, whether it is that we're actually giving them an asset back or providing them, creating a liability within your system by giving them a gift certificate, Uplifter needs to know where to attribute the according asset that we're giving back or the liability that we're issuing in terms of how that's going to impact your revenues. So that's why it's important to adjust the top part of your invoice to determine where are we actually giving that money back. And then as well, the bottom part of the invoice, which is the actual cash that is actually being returned or the credit that's being attached to the account. So that's why it's very important in Uplifter to ensure that all of your invoices balance, because we need to know how to make sure that your ledger balances if you're using that feature.
Yeah, fantastic. So we are going to look at, as Jackie noted, we're running out of time here.
I
We're going
know.
to look at one last item here, and then maybe peek at, no, probably just this one last item. Okay, we're going to do one last item. This is very, very common. It is going to be a program exchange where you guys owe money to the user in the end. So here we have an example there in Webinar Wednesdays. They've paid the $710, but now they're going to exchange to a cheaper program. So we're going to add the program that they want. And let's find one that's cheaper here. Here we are, 213. Ooh, one spot left. Good timing. So we're going to add that into the system. And now that that program is present, we can now withdraw them from this program. And again, if they haven't really been involved in the program, you could technically delete it. My personal preference is to click withdraw and add an adjustment to change this. Withdrawn. And we're going to do this at the full value here. Oops. Having a lot of trouble typing. There we are. So now we are giving them back the full value of their previous purchase, but now they're going into another program that is a little bit cheaper. Now that we've made these adjustments, that's all the hard work. That's it. We just needed to adjust this, add this, and we're ready to go, because now when we scroll down to the bottom, the system's going to say, hey, wait a minute, mister, you're not allowed to post this invoice until you actually make this refund process. So we're going to click to refund. We're going to make any adjustments that we need to, but generally by default, everything here is A-OK. We're going to click OK, and now we're ready to hit post. And that is it. So that is a very common element, very, very quick to do. Obviously, the more practice you have in that, the faster you're going to be. You're not going to come out of the gates as masterful as I am, of course, but you can definitely get there within just a couple of instances and clicking around and seeing what happens.
I know. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
No.
I was going to say, I know we're up at our hour, but I really, really would like to show them a few of the reports as well. So can we,
Yes.
I know that we're running over time, and I apologize to everybody here that you've had to listen to us banter back and forth for the last hour. But
As a quick side note, I'm really sorry. We are actually recording this. We'll have this up on the webinar. So if you do have to go, that's no problem. We will have this available for you afterwards. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Jackie.
Well, no, go ahead. I was going to let you dive in, unless you had nothing that you wanted to say about reports.
I don't want to say anything about reports.
Okay, I guess we'll just be quiet then? No.
Yes, we'll just be quiet for the next 10 minutes, yeah. So on the reports page here, you will have access to a myriad of reports. There's actually a lot of reports on this page. Now, depending on the tier of Uplifter that you have, you may have a reduced or limited listing here. But if you're on the fully uplifted or the new gold package here, you will have the full suite of reports. Now, as we scan through here, as you can see, there's just a ton of reports here. There's ways to get absolutely every piece of information you could ever want from the system, and often from multiple different perspectives. So if you are looking for financial information, that's actually something we're going to be reviewing in our next webinar, I believe, when we start talking about accounting practices and stuff like that, and obtaining that piece of information. But in this instance, oh, sorry, Jackie.
We are, but I have a surprise for you, Garrett.
Oh, geez. Okay, what is it?
If you click on the invoices summary report, I just added this morning. So I thought I would surprise you. You don't sound surprised at all. You're like, yeah, whatever, new filters. Excellent. Great. Sorry, I was really excited when I wrote the code for this. I just want to tell you. So if you slide down, I've actually added a couple of new options here. Now we actually have a couple of new, oh, you found it. You found it without me telling you. So the invoices summary report actually gives you a really great overview of everything that you just saw on the invoice. It gives you a summary of how much the invoice is totaled and what the different revenues are. But now we've also added a couple of different options to group the revenue by, which will add a bunch of different columns to the report. So for example, if you were to say additionally by SKU, if you want to click that one, you could probably, and actually just to go, go ahead and preview. But as we go through, I think I've mentioned this before, or Garrett has mentioned this before, but all of our date fields within Uplifter allow you to actually create reports with relative dates in mind. So if you actually want to see all the invoices that were completed within the first day of this month, you can type that, and it will just automatically figure that out. And if you actually save this report, whenever you come back to this report, it will always use those relative dates based on the date that you actually did do that. So if you actually go down and see the report that, did you actually generate the, okay. So if you actually scroll over to the right, so not only do we have basics of the invoice, who it was issued to, and the costs, if you actually scroll so we can see the column headers, because it's just a lot of generic, there we go. So What this now does is with any of the SKUs within your system, it actually provides you a breakdown of the revenue for each of those individual SKUs on a per invoice basis. So for any of you clubs that are working primarily on a cash basis accounting method, or you're not using our ledger accounts feature, this report here can break it down either by category level or SKU based on each particular invoice, so that you can then summarize that information into your accounting systems if that's how you actually want to pull those reports in that method. So I hope that was that exciting for you, Garrett? I don't know. You're like
You can't begin to imagine how excited I am. Yeah.
your voice just
That's
says
also
it
my
all.
voice.
Your voice says it all. Thanks. I stayed up
Uh,
late building this for you. I just want you to know.
I'm so excited. That's everything that I had. Jackie, did you want to tackle anything further? I know we're actually a little bit over an hour here.
Yeah, we are. You know what? With the reports, a couple of reports that we probably won't be covering next week as well is the lots of reports on member information, participant registration. Those are some great reports to look at. Participants registered programs is another great report that sort of pivots information so that you can actually see on a per participant basis what each of the programs they are registered for. With this report, I do recommend pulling this report with if you go down, there's a check mark that says group by, or sorry, shows registered programs as separate columns. This gives you an overview, and you can actually sort the different elements of the report so that you can actually see, how many of your participants actually registered for more than one program for the season, which is sometimes really good information to have. Other things to keep in mind with the reports, which is great. If none of you know, you can actually select the specific columns that you would like displayed in the report. You can also rearrange them. And then once you've actually done that, especially because you're probably using these reports on a very regular basis, you can also save these reports. When you're saving reports, you can actually give it a title. It appears in the menu like you might have seen before. A couple of things. If you actually save that as your default report, what this means is that anybody else who actually comes to this report, the filters in the columns that you've selected, it'll auto-select and auto-fill in all of those filters the way that you had actually entered them in. So then that way it saves you a few clicks. If you find that you're coming to a report over and over and over again and always doing the same things, you might want to save the filters that you've created as your default report. You can do it either just for you or globally. It's really up to you. And then what that does is it saves you a few clicks, and you can still manipulate the report after that. Additionally, if you do want to share the reports, a great thing to do is actually use the report sharing, where you can either share it with everybody else who has permissions to view that type of report, or as well only share it with specific members who may or may not actually have administrative access to Uplifter. And if they don't, when you select specific member, I think is what it is, under view specific administrators, you can actually start typing in the names of people who actually have an account within Uplifter. And once you've done that, you can have it send them an email so that they have a private link that they would use to actually access that report at any given time that they need to. And it would always update based on the time that they pull the report. So this is great for if you have some volunteers working within the system and you want them to be able to see maybe a class list because they're supposed to be volunteering to bring treats. So they need to know how many kids are there, or they need to create name tags or whatnot. So this is a great way to share that information without giving full administrative access to your Uplifter site. And again, if you use the relative dates, then whenever it is that they pull that report, it will pull that report based off of the relative dates that you specified. So those are some really great ways to get the most out of the reports. A couple more reports, and I know that we're running out of time, that I love to actually tell you about would be the attendance printout reports. That's a great one to use. This was actually added just recently in the last year or so, maybe the last few months. So with the attendance printout reports, this is a great way to get a full Excel sheet of your class lists. You can break them down by group. So if you've actually grouped your different programs, let's say you're running a can skate where you've got 6 different groups on the ice, or you've got a gymnastics club and you've got you've broken it up so that you've got your coach ratios down and you've got two kids that are rotating across the floor, or two groups of kids that are rotating across the floor, it can actually create separate spreadsheets in different tabs based on the groups that you've created. And then it separates it out so that you can just say print all tabs and it'll do that for you. A great way to actually use this report, because this report is actually utilized off of your dashboard, would be to do something like when you're displaying the attendance columns, maybe you only want to display the attendance columns for this month. So you can say display attendance columns to last day of this month type thing. And then that way it only shows you basically this month's attendance. You could also double up this attendance report to be used for a sign-in or sign-out sheet if you're running a camp or somewhere, some type of program where you want the parents to actually sign their children in and out. You can actually check off the display sign-in and sign-out, and it automatically adds a couple of boxes within the report so that the parents have room to actually put an initial or sign their name in when they're actually coming in and out. So there's definitely a lot of different ways to actually manipulate this report. If you save this report as your default report, when you actually go to your dashboard and you pull the attendance reports from the dashboard, it will actually maintain the different filters that you've created based off of the default report filters that you've selected there. So that is, and Garrett's just, oh yeah, excellent. We have some events today. Perfect. So the attendance printouts that appear there would automatically use those default filters that you put in there. So those are some great ways to sort of get the most out of your reports. That is like a really condensed version of my crash course in reports. Was there anything else was there anything else in reports that you wanted to cover off? And thank you for keeping up with my quick rambling there, Garrett. You're like navigating through. I can see your mouse just sort of squirreling away there. So was there?
Want to clear default report? Sorry, if you do want to clear out these default reports, I would probably recommend just clearing out all the filters and then just clicking save again. Unless, Jackie, do you know of a way to do that?
I believe you can just deselect default, the checkbox from default report.
Oh, okay. Yep.
I believe so, and then click save. Yeah. And then that'll get rid of it there. Yes, and that'll.
Yeah. You've thought of everything.
Yeah, we tried really hard on this one. So if you want to go back to the reports tab really quickly, I'll just take a quick scan to see if there's anything else that was really, really important to show off. We're going to talk about the ledger reports in more detail next week, so I will leave that one off. I think that's. I think if anyone at your club wants to know how to actually leverage information out of Uplifter, please send us an email at support@uplifterinc.com and we can provide you with some guidance on how to get the most out of the reporting. Not only do we have these reports, but don't forget that on any of our manager pages within Uplifter, very often you will see a quick CSV export on the top that if you filtered your data to a particular way and you just need this data really quickly to just do some quick breakdowns, this is a great way to also get your data as well. So lots of different ways to pull your data out of Uplifter. We are well over an hour. Garrett, is there anything else that you wanted to go over before we wrap it up here?
No, I just want to say thank you to absolutely everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Our next webinar is obviously next Wednesday for Wednesday webinars, Webinar Wednesdays, and it is about accounting and ledgers. So it's definitely going to be a very popular one. Oops, sorry, my apologies. This one right here. So definitely don't miss that.
Yeah, and everybody should drink coffee because I speak really quickly. And I'm going to be actually doing the webinar next week, and so Garrett's going to have to try to find ways to slow down my.
We'll record it, and I'll just play it back at like 0.75 speed. It'll be fine. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Can we auto tune it as well? Excellent.
Yes, we can. Absolutely.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for Wednesday webinars. I hope that this was informative, and please join us again. We're doing this every Wednesday until Garrett and I can't do it anymore. And we'll have a recording up on our website available for you to catch if you want to share this with any of your other administrators. So Garrett, I'll let you sign off there.
Yeah, thank you so much for everyone for your time today, and we always appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.